So I want to start with this. I am alone. Who I am doesn't matter, and what I do doesn't matter. These three thoughts destroy a human being. And so many people feel this way now. I know so many, don't you? Maybe some people in this room right now feel alone and that they don't matter. Anxiety, grief, and loneliness have become a worldwide pandemic, much worse than the last one. I'm here to talk about the inner unrest within us. And I want to talk about it in a different way than you've heard before. And to tell you that anxiety, grief, and loneliness can be alleviated and healed. We've been led to believe that all we can do is medicate and cope. Most aren't even aware that healing is a possibility, but I assure you that it is. I've been teaching breath work for 30 years around the world to tens of thousands of people. And the reason I tell you this is because it's given me a unique skill set and perspective on the interplay and interaction between emotions and our breath. And they very much are intertwined. The mental health industry is finally acknowledging the importance of breath work for therapy, which is why therapists and psychologists are now learning my breathing techniques that I teach to people around the world. Now, breath work doesn't replace talk therapy. It supercharges it. Now, there's another component that I think we've been missing altogether, and that is that as a society, I don't know how to say this any other way except we don't know how to look after each other during crisis. We just haven't been taught. We don't know what to say. We don't know what to do. We're afraid of making things more awkward. And so instead of coming together for crises, we tend to disappear a little bit and be terrified of things like crying. She's crying. It's like someone is broken when they're crying. I think that what we're struggling with is actually not mental health. I believe that what we're struggling with is emotional health and social health. And these are entirely different things. For example, I think that if you're lonely, it's not because your brain is malfunctioning or a chemical imbalance. It's because you're disconnected with other people. I think if you have anxiety, in many cases, maybe most cases, also, it's from a lack of understanding how to communicate about our deepest emotions and our deepest memories that haunt us from the inside out. We gather for weddings, but not divorces. We gather for baby showers, but not miscarriages. You see what I mean? But when we're in despair, it's when we need each other the most. We are a tribal species with tribal instincts. I was talking about this at a gathering, and a young couple came up to me. They were in their early 30s, and they had tears in their eyes, and they said, "Thank you so much for talking about this. We've never heard anybody talk about this before. And we lost our 1-year-old boy last year. It was an accident at childcare while we were at work. And the worst part was after he died, most of our friends abandoned us. So we not only had to grieve our dear boy, but we had to grieve half of our friends." Now, upon hearing this, you might think, well, then they weren't really friends. But from my experience, this is probably not true. They probably loved them very much, but they didn't know what to say. They didn't know what to do. They're afraid of making things awkward. And in the name of giving them privacy, they abandon them. And this story happens again and again and again in our life. We're in a worldwide state of emergency, as far as I'm concerned, emotionally. And even our children are suffering from high anxiety, self-harm, suicidal thoughts. And the mental health care industry is trying to science its way out of this. But have you noticed it's getting worse? It's not working. And that's because they're not going to find the solution. Science will not find the solution to this because we are not machines. The human heart is not a machine. Some things you can fix, like a car engine. But the human heart can only be healed. And healing and fixing are not the same at all. They're entirely different. I want to show you something. I'm going to ask you to help me. I'd like you to raise your hand high and hold it for a moment because I can't see that well with the light in my eyes. So if you've learned CPR at some point in your life, raise your hand high, please. Keep it up for a moment. And those of you in the front, look around. Look at how many hands are up. Fantastic. Thank you. You can put your hand down. So that was about 80%, I would say. Now here's my next question. I'd like you to raise your hand if when you were a child or a young adult, you were taught in a useful way and meaningful way how to deal with your grief or the grief of others. In a useful way. Raise your hand. Raise it high. Good. Keep it up for a moment. Those of you in the front, look behind you. Look all around. And for those of you at home watching this, there are I count three hands up. Thank you very much. So what this means to me is if our heart stops, 80% of us know what to do. If our heart breaks, 3 people in here know what to do. We have no idea. We're totally uneducated. We're not stupid. We're uneducated. It's not part of our culture, and I think this really needs to change. Have you ever noticed that sometime you might hear a song or someone will say something and you'll remember someone and start to cry quite heavily, and then you apologize and you say, I don't know why I'm still crying. It was 20 years ago or 50 years ago. And the reason is because 20 years or 50 years of suppression is not 20 years of healing. It stays alive within us because what we tend to do is we have a traumatic event and we interrupt the healing process. Grieving is not a problem. Grieving is healing. Think about it. That's the first thing you did when you were a child was start to cry. But grieving is not only crying. It's how the heart learns to process and then integrate a terrifying or traumatic crisis in our life. But what we do is we don't know how to grieve, particularly not together. We might grieve alone in a room and hope the neighbors don't hear us, you see. But we don't know how to grieve, so we interrupt it. We interrupt it and we suppress it. We go through a divorce, we suppress it. We go through a bankruptcy, we suppress it. Someone we care for so much dies, we suppress it. And it all stays alive, unhealed within us. And that energy that I just described to you, that's what we call anxiety. And when it gets too big to suppress, we call that a panic attack. So when we learn to grieve, again, we can start processing this unseen, unhealed, unfelt emotion, because it's not just emotion, it's memory also, and actually heal. But how do you get there? How do you get to it? because we've got a lot of cement over it, and then we put a suit of armor over the top, playing around, and wonder why we're kind of lonely, even with people that we love. Some people are very lonely in their own marriage, with their own children, with their best friends. We've been taught how not to heal. We don't know how to ask for help when we need it or accept it when it's offered. And this is the other part. So far I've covered the part where if someone has a crisis, I don't know what to do. But the other part of it is, will he let me help him? Will he let me in? Will he tell me he's in crisis? Because a lot of us live only with half our heart. And what I mean by that is we're good at giving. We're actually good at looking after other people. Maybe you're a healer. Maybe you're a breathing teacher. But you can't accept it. You can't receive. You're not such a good patient. Yeah. So I want to give you an example of this. I was giving a talk to a group of people, and I got to about this point, and I opened it up for questions. And a lady in the front row, very, very strong woman, I'd say she was 50 years old, tough, strong, smart woman, mother. She raised her hand and she said, "Max, I completely disagree with you." She said, "I completely disagree with you. My problems are my problems. I'm not going to dump my problems on my family or my friends. They have problems of their own. I'm not going to be a burden to anybody," she said. I said, "Okay." And I took an inhale to respond, and then I didn't need to. Because on that day, somehow, the universe sent an angel into the room, because right behind her, a little bit to the side, where you're sitting mainly, was this woman who leaned forward to the other woman and tapped her on her shoulder. And the woman in the front row looked behind her. And the woman in the second row said, "You don't know me." "You don't know me, but if you were my friend, it would be an honor to look after you." She said, "You're not a burden. It's an honor. It's an honor." And the tough woman in the front row, you know how she reacted? Can you guess? She put her hands on her face and just started crying. So her first response, I believe, was the response that she believes she should take, that society demands of her. Be strong. Keep it to yourself. Cowboy up. And the lady behind her said something to her I'm sure she'd never heard in her life. I'm sure no one had ever said to her, "It's an honor," and it is an honor. You only let the people in your closest circle near you when you're grieving, when you're in crisis, when you're ashamed, when you've crashed to your knees, when you're thinking of taking your own life. Only those nearest to you that you trust the most, that you don't know what you would do without, they're the ones you turn to, if you turn to anyone at all. So part of it is we don't know how to look after each other, but the other is we don't know how to ask for help, and we even believe it's wrong. So I think it's time that we learn to grieve together, not alone. Not all the time. Don't go to the opposite end of the spectrum and think, that everyone should be crying every day, break down at work all the time, again. That's not what I'm saying. But there's a huge distance between never crying and always crying. Never grieving. Remember, grieving is not just crying. It's the process with which we heal. We are a tribal species with tribal instincts. Please don't forget that. And for those of you in crisis right now, remember, it is an honor to look after the ones we love. It is an honor to look after you. All you have to do is let us. We're going to heal the broken heart of this world. You and I are going to heal the broken heart of this world because this world's heart is broken. Together we heal. Together we heal.